My name is Emma Carver, and at 32 years old, I thought buying my first house in Willow Heights would be the beginning of my happily ever after. I was wrong. What started with a friendly note about my garden flowers turned into a nightmare of petty violations, slashed tires, and a Christmas party invitation that never arrived. They made it crystal clear I didn't belong in their perfect little neighborhood. So I left. But here's the thing about underestimating a self-made architect who's used to fighting for everything she has. Sometimes the person you push out comes back, and when she does, she owns the ground you're standing on. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment below telling me where you're from, and make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories. The day I moved into Willow Heights, the sun hit the manicured lawns just right, making everything look like it belonged in a magazine spread. Perfect hedges, perfect houses, perfect smiles from behind Venetian blinds. I remember thinking this was it. The reward for all those years of grinding through architecture school while working 3 jobs, for every rejected proposal and sleepless night hunched over blueprints in my tiny apartment. I'd bought the smallest house on the cul-de-sac, the corner property that everyone else had apparently passed over. The realtor had been almost apologetic about it, though I couldn't understand why. It had good bones, southern exposure, and a yard that was crying out for something more interesting than the identical rose bushes that lined every other property on the street. My first HOA meeting should have been a warning. I walked into the community center with a box of bakery cookies, nothing fancy, just a gesture, and immediately felt the temperature drop. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they shifted, modulated. The smiles that greeted me were the kind you give to door-to-door salespeople, polite but with an expiration date. Patricia Langford sat at the head of the table like she was born there. Pearls, perfectly highlighted hair, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She was the kind of woman who used we when she meant I and concern when she meant control. "Welcome to Willow Heights," she'd said, her gaze sweeping over me in a way that felt like an appraisal. "We maintain certain standards here. I'm sure you understand." I didn't, not then. But I nodded anyway, eager to belong. The garden incident came 2 weeks later. I'd spent my first Saturday planting native wildflowers, black-eyed Susans, purple coneflowers, butterfly weed. Species that belonged to this soil, that would feed the bees and require less water. I was proud of it, the way the colors would bloom in waves through the seasons, the way it felt like I was healing a small patch of earth. The note appeared on my door Monday morning, tucked into the frame. Printed, not handwritten. Friendly reminder about property values and approved landscaping. Non-native plantings can impact the aesthetic cohesion of our community. The Langfords. Non-native. The irony would have been funny if my stomach hadn't been twisting. My flowers were more native than their imported Dutch roses, but I understood what was really being said. I didn't fit their aesthetic cohesion. The street barbecue was worse. I'd spent hours on a peach pie, my grandmother's recipe, the kind that made the whole house smell like summer. I showed up with it still warm, wearing my best sundress, determined to make this work. Patricia was holding court by the grill, surrounded by the neighborhood women in their linen pants and designer sunglasses. I approached with my pie held out like an offering, and she turned to me with that smile again. "Oh, everyone, this is Emma, the girl who bought the corner house before the real buyers could close." She laughed, light and airy, and the circle laughed with her. We were so surprised when that sale went through. I stood there, pie in hand, face burning, while they moved on to discussing someone's kitchen renovation. I left the pie on the dessert table and walked home early, watching through my window as the street filled with lights and laughter. Every porch but mine. That's when the violations started arriving. My trash bins were visible from the street, by 6 inches on Tuesday morning, the same as everyone else's. My mailbox was non-compliant. It was identical to 4 others on the block. My yard had unapproved organic growth patterns, my wildflowers, which were now blooming beautifully and attracting more butterflies than I'd seen anywhere else in the neighborhood. I paid the fines. All of them. And I started keeping records. Caleb Torres found me one evening, sitting on my porch with my laptop, photographing the identical mailboxes up and down the street. He was in his deputy's uniform, just finishing his shift, and he had the kind of face that looked like it smiled often, though it wasn't smiling then. "You're documenting," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm trying to understand the rules," I replied. He sat down on my porch steps without being invited, which somehow felt okay. "Patricia Langford runs this HOA like a personal fiefdom. Has for 8 years. You're not the first person she's targeted, just the first one stubborn enough to stay this long. How long do the others usually last? 6 months, tops." He looked at me with something like respect. "Keep those records. Date everything. You're going to need them." I didn't ask what for. I just kept photographing, kept documenting, kept paying fines that no one else received for the same infractions. I watched Martin Langford park his truck over the sidewalk every Thursday, no violation. I watched the Hendersons repaint their shutters without approval, no violation. I watched the rules bend and stretch and break for everyone except me. The Christmas gala invitation never came. Patricia claimed it must have been lost in the mail, though everyone else received theirs. I sat in my dark living room that night, watching the street transform into a winter wonderland, white lights and red bows, and the sound of carol singers drifting through my closed windows. My porch stayed dark. My house, a blank spot in their perfect picture. The community forum post appeared 2 days later. Anonymous, of course. "She doesn't fit here. Maybe she should move back to where she belongs." 43 likes. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering where exactly they thought I belonged. Wondering what it was about me that made me so unacceptable to them. My clothes weren't wrong. My house was well maintained. I'd done everything right or tried to, and still, I was the dark spot on their perfect street. The tire slashing was almost a relief. At least it was honest. I came out Monday morning to find all 4 tires flat, sliced cleanly through the sidewalls. The HOA meeting that night was full of concerned faces and empty promises. "Probably random," Patricia said, though her eyes said otherwise. "You should be more careful about where you park." I'd parked in my own driveway. That night, I looked at my documentation folder. Months of photographs, dated emails, violation notices with timestamps showing the selective enforcement. I had a case, probably. I could fight this. Maybe win some small victory, get them to back off. But as I sat there, looking at all that evidence of their cruelty, I realized something. I was tired. Bone tired. Soul tired. Tired of fighting to be accepted by people who would never see me as one of them. Tired of making myself smaller, quieter, more palatable, and still being rejected. I put my house on the market the next morning. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, Patricia was at my door with a casserole and a smile that was almost genuine. Almost. "I heard you're leaving," she said, standing on my porch like she'd been invited. "That's probably for the best. Some people just aren't cut out for community living." I wanted to throw the casserole in her face. Instead, I took it, thanked her, and closed the door. I fed the entire thing to the raccoons that night. Even they seemed suspicious of it. The insurance company denied my claim for the tires. "No evidence of malicious intent," they said. "Could have been environmental damage." I'd sent them photos of the clean slices, the obvious knife marks, but it didn't matter. Patricia's husband Martin worked in insurance. I couldn't prove anything, but I knew. Moving day came faster than I expected. I'd priced the house to sell quickly, taking a loss just to get out. The movers were loading the last boxes when Patricia emerged from her house, coffee mug in hand, to watch. She actually waved. "Some people just can't handle responsibility," she called out, her voice carrying across the street. Loud enough for the neighbors to hear, for them to nod and murmur agreement. I stopped, one foot in my car, and looked at her. Really looked at her. She was so sure of herself, so certain she'd won. So convinced that her cruelty was somehow righteousness. "Some people," I said quietly, "mistake cruelty for power." Her smile faltered, just for a second. Then it snapped back into place, harder than before. "Good luck out there, Emma. I hope you find somewhere you fit." I drove away slowly, watching Willow Heights disappear in my rearview mirror. Past the perfect lawns, the perfect houses, the gate with its pretentious name. I whispered to myself, more promise than threat. You'll see me again. The apartment I rented downtown was a quarter the size of my house and twice the rent, but it was mine in a way Willow Heights never was. No HOA, no Patricia, no rules about what color I could paint my door, or what flowers I could plant in the window boxes I didn't have. I threw myself into work. 12-hour days, 14-hour days, weekends at the drafting table. I designed eco-friendly community spaces, affordable housing with green roofs and shared gardens, places where people could actually live instead of just existing in expensive boxes. My projects caught attention. First locally, then regionally. I won a sustainability award, then another. And that's how I met Reed Maxwell. He walked into my office on a Thursday afternoon, unannounced, and I almost didn't recognize him. The Reed Maxwell, the reclusive real estate investor who'd made a fortune buying up failed developments and transforming them into something better. He wore jeans and a t-shirt, looked more like a grad student than a millionaire, and he was holding a copy of my design portfolio. I like your work, he said, skipping past introductions. You design like you're angry at something. I laughed despite myself. Is that a compliment? It is when the anger is pointed in the right direction. He dropped into the chair across from my desk without being invited. I'm buying up foreclosed suburban developments. The kind that promise luxury and deliver debt. I want to repurpose them sustainably, ethically, and profitably. And I want you to help me do it. We talked for 3 hours. He was brilliant, abrasive, and genuinely committed to changing how suburban development worked. By the time he left, I had a partnership offer and a stack of folders to review. I opened the first folder that night with a glass of wine, expecting another faceless subdivision in financial trouble. The name on the tab made me freeze. Willow Heights Homeowners Association, pending bank review. My hands shook as I read through the documents. The HOA was underwater. Patricia had refinanced the community's land fund, money that was supposed to maintain infrastructure, to build that private park with its fancy playground and Italian pavers. She'd leveraged everything, assuming property values would keep climbing forever, and now the whole neighborhood was tied up in risky debt. The bank was preparing to foreclose on the underlying land rights. Everything beneath those perfect houses, the streets, the utilities, the easements, the parks, was about to go up for auction. I called Reed the next morning. My voice was steady, professional. The Willow Heights file. Tell me more about it. He rattled off the details: over-leveraged, poor management, board president with a history of questionable decisions. It's small potatoes compared to most of our targets, but it's a clean acquisition. Why, you interested? If you want this one, I said carefully, I'd like to take point on it. There was a pause. Then, Emma, I don't ask about people's personal history. But I need to know, can you be objective about this? Could I? I thought about my slashed tires, my dark porch at Christmas, Patricia's smug face, as I drove away. I can be fair, I said. That's better than objective. Another pause. Then he laughed. You know what? It's yours. Show me what angry architecture looks like in practice. I spent the next 3 months learning everything about Willow Heights that I hadn't known when I lived there. The financial records were a mess. Patricia's park had cost 3 times the approved budget, with most of the overruns going to her husband's contracting company. The land underneath the neighborhood had been parceled off in complicated ways over the years, bits and pieces sold to cover shortfalls, until the whole thing was a legal nightmare. And at the center of it all, the mortgage liens. If someone bought those liens, they'd control the land underneath those perfect houses. I formed W&H Development LLC, Willow and Heights, a little joke for myself, buried under enough paperwork that my name wouldn't surface in a casual search. Reed's network provided the financial backing. We started buying quietly, strategically. Not the houses themselves, but the bones underneath them. The easements, the utility corridors, the shared spaces. It was remarkably easy. Banks were happy to unload the complicated parcels. Homeowners didn't pay attention to the technical filings. Within 6 months, W&H Development owned the ground Willow Heights stood on, and no one had noticed. I sat in my office on a December evening, snow falling outside my window, and pulled up the Willow Heights website. They'd posted their Christmas gala flyer. Bigger than ever, more lights, more exclusivity. Perfection lives here. The tagline read, above a photo of Patricia cutting a ribbon at the park she'd built with stolen money. I whispered to the screen, not for long. The first legal notices went out in January. Bland, bureaucratic language about updated property maintenance covenants and title holder notifications. Most people probably threw them away, thinking it was spam. But Patricia would read hers. Patricia read everything. I drove through Willow Heights on a Saturday afternoon, renting an anonymous sedan, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Nothing had changed. Same perfect hedges, same gossiping neighbors clustered by mailboxes, same sense of manufactured perfection. My old corner house looked good. Someone had repainted, replaced my wildflowers with regulation roses. Erased me completely, or tried to. But I'd learned something in my year away. You can't erase people, only push them underground. And what grows underground eventually breaks through concrete. Caleb's patrol car pulled up behind me at the stop sign. I should have kept driving, but I waited, watched him climb out and approach my window with that same kind, careful expression. "You came back," he said, recognizing me immediately. "Not exactly," I replied. His eyes narrowed, reading something in my face. "Emma, what did you do?" "Nothing illegal. Nothing unethical. Just business." He studied me for a long moment. "You're different. I'm the same person I always was. I'm just done pretending to be smaller." He glanced up the street toward Patricia's house, then back to me. "Whatever you're planning." "I'm not planning anything, Caleb. I already did it." I drove away, watching him in my mirror, standing in the middle of the street with his hand on his radio, deciding whether to call this in. But what would he say? A woman drove through a public street? I was careful now. Legal now. Untouchable. Patricia called the bank on a Tuesday. I know because my lawyer got the notification. W&H Development had to be informed of any inquiries into the title structure. "She'd been calm at first," he said, asking routine questions about mortgage renewal. Then her voice had changed when they mentioned the new title holder. "The what?" she'd said. He reported she'd sounded genuinely confused, then angry, then shrill. She demanded to know who W&H Development was, threatened legal action, insisted there must be some mistake. The HOA meeting she called 2 weeks later was gratifying even from a distance. My lawyer attended as W&H's representative. At my insistence, we maintained corporate anonymity, and he reported back with barely concealed amusement. Patricia had been nearly incoherent, waving documents around, insisting this was some kind of scam or fraud. Martin had been there too, trying to look authoritative while clearly understanding even less than his wife. The other residents ranged from confused to panicked, suddenly aware that their perfect neighborhood was built on financial quicksand. "Who are these people?" Martin had demanded. "And what do they want?" My lawyer had been perfectly polite. W&H Development is a legitimate real estate investment firm. We've acquired controlling interest in the land titles underlying this community as part of a standard portfolio diversification. We're not planning any immediate changes, but we will be conducting routine audits of land use, environmental compliance, and covenant enforcement to ensure our investment is properly maintained. Environmental compliance. Covenant enforcement. All the language Patricia had used to torture me reflected back at her. The first homeowner reached out directly 2 weeks later, emailing W&H's general contact address. A polite note asking about an extension on some paperwork deadline, apologizing for the confusion, clearly worried about the new corporate overlord. I read it 3 times before responding. Then I wrote back, carefully professional but warm. "Of course. We take care of our residents." I signed it with my name. Emma Carver, Principal, W&H Development. I knew it would spread. Give it 48 hours, and everyone on that street would know exactly who owned the ground beneath their feet. I wasn't wrong. By Thursday, Caleb was at my office. "You should have told me," he said, standing in my doorway. "And you would have said what? Don't do it? It's not right." I leaned back in my chair. "I didn't break any laws, Caleb. I bought property that was for sale. The fact that it's property underneath people who broke me is just geography. This isn't justice, Emma. It's revenge. It's both, I said. And maybe it's also just me, taking care of a broken place the way someone should have done years ago.
He sat down slowly.
What are you going to do? Nothing cruel. Nothing like what they did to me. I met his eyes. I'm going to fix it, Caleb. Actually fix it. The debt, the mismanagement, the corruption. I'm going to turn that place into what it should have been all along. And Patricia? I smiled, not kindly. Patricia is going to learn what it feels like to be powerless, to follow someone else's rules, to be unwelcome in the place she thought she owned. He was quiet for a long moment. Don't let this turn you into them. It won't, I said. But I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. The whispers started immediately. I heard about them third hand, fourth hand, through the network of contractors and vendors who worked in Willow Heights. Did you hear? That woman Patricia drove out. She owns the whole neighborhood now. No way. Yes way. My cousin's friend works at the title company. It's real. Patricia denied it at first. Posted on the community forum that it was rumors, misinformation, probably spread by malcontents trying to destabilize property values. But then the bank called her again, and this time they told her explicitly her mortgage renewal would need to be approved by the new title holder, W&H Development, owned by Emma Carver. The HOA's reserve funds vanished overnight. Not literally. They were frozen pending an audit that my lawyer had requested, looking into the discrepancies in Patricia's park construction costs. Suddenly, the community couldn't pay its landscaping service, its snow removal, its street lighting. The perfect neighborhood started to fray at the edges. I received a formal letter from Patricia's lawyer. It threatened everything from fraud to harassment to intentional infliction of emotional distress. My lawyer read it, laughed, and filed it with a polite response pointing out that all of W&H's actions were entirely legal and that any further baseless accusations would be met with a countersuit for defamation. The letter stopped. The threats didn't. I decided it was time to visit. Properly, this time. Not hiding in a rental car, but walking through those gates like I had every right to be there. Because I did. The black SUV was Reed's idea. If you're going to make an entrance, he'd said. I wore a blazer, heels, and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you hold all the cards. I parked in front of the community center, the same building where I'd attended my first HOA meeting with my sad box of cookies. Faces appeared in windows. People stopped their yard work to stare. I walked up the front path like I owned the place because, in the ways that mattered, I did. Patricia met me at the door. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown. Her perfect hair was slightly mussed, her makeup not quite as flawless. She'd aged a year in these few months, and it showed. You can't be here, she said.
No preamble, no fake politeness.
Just raw anger. This is business property now, I replied evenly. I'm here for an inspection. You're welcome to accompany me or not. I walked past her, into the building I'd once entered, so hopefully. The conference room was the same long table, same uncomfortable chairs. I sat at the head, where Patricia used to sit, and opened my laptop. She followed me in, trembling with rage. What do you want?
Money?
Is that what this is about? I want what I wanted when I moved here, I said. A place where people are treated fairly, where the rules apply to everyone, where you can plant native flowers without being punished for it. You're destroying this neighborhood. You destroyed it, I interrupted. When you embezzled HOA funds to pay your husband's company. When you targeted anyone who didn't fit your narrow definition of acceptable. When you built your perfect little kingdom on debt and cruelty. I closed my laptop. I'm just cleaning up the mess you left behind. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. The fight went out of her all at once, and she collapsed into a chair. We just wanted to protect our neighborhood. From what? I asked quietly. From kindness? From diversity? From people who were different from you? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer, maybe. Caleb found me afterwards, sitting on the park bench. Patricia's park, the one she'd built with stolen money. He sat down beside me without asking. You proved your point, he said. Don't let this turn you into them. You keep saying that. Because I'm worried it's true. He looked at me, and I saw genuine concern in his eyes. I've seen what revenge does to people, Emma. It eats you from the inside. You think you're getting justice, but you're just becoming the thing you hate. I wanted to argue, but sitting there, in that perfect park in that perfect neighborhood, I felt the weight of what I was doing. The power I held over these people's lives. The satisfaction I'd felt watching Patricia crumble. Was I becoming her? What should I do? I asked, and I genuinely didn't know the answer. Be better than them, Caleb said. Not bitter. Better. The media found the story 2 weeks later. Corrupt HOA board faces foreclosure by former resident. The local paper ran it on the front page, complete with photos of Patricia's park and a detailed breakdown of the financial mismanagement. I'd stayed anonymous in the article, credited only as a former resident who declined to comment, but everyone knew. My phone rang off the hook. Investors wanted to know about my strategy. Other HOA victims wanted advice. A documentary filmmaker wanted to tell my story. I declined everything, kept my head down, and focused on the work. Because there was work to do. Willow Heights wasn't just Patricia's mess. It was a community of people who'd been complicit in her cruelty, but also people who'd been hurt by it. Elderly residents who'd been afraid to speak up. Young families who'd moved in thinking they'd found paradise and discovered a prison instead. People who deserved better than what they'd gotten, better than what I was giving them now. I called a community meeting. Not through Patricia, who'd resigned from the board in disgrace, but directly through W&H Development. Required attendance for all homeowners. Sunday afternoon at the park. They came. All of them. Curious, angry, scared. I stood on the same platform where Patricia had cut the ribbon on her stolen park, and I looked at all those faces that had once looked at me with such disdain. You all built walls around yourselves, I said. My voice was steady, clear. Walls to keep out people like me. People who didn't fit your image of perfection. You let Patricia Langford turn this neighborhood into her personal kingdom, and you either participated or stayed silent while she hurt people. I paused. I just bought the land under those walls. The silence was absolute. Then, from the back, an elderly woman raised her hand. Mrs. Chun, I remembered. She'd always smiled at me, but never spoken. I'm sorry, she said, and her voice cracked. I wanted to be kind to you, but I was afraid. Patricia said if we didn't maintain standards, our property values would drop, and I couldn't afford.
I'm sorry.
She was crying. And suddenly, I saw them not as the monolithic force that had pushed me out, but as individuals.
Some cruel, yes.
Some cowardly. But some just scared, just trying to protect the investments they'd poured their lives into, manipulated by someone who knew how to weaponize that fear. I felt something shift inside me. The anger that had driven me for a year, that had fueled every late night researching property law and every careful acquisition, suddenly felt heavy. Tired. I forgive you, I said to Mrs. Chen. And I meant it. But Patricia was a different story. She appeared at the edge of the crowd, Martin beside her, both of them dressed like they were going to court. Which probably they would be soon. This isn't over, Patricia called out. Her voice had that shrill edge again. You think you can just take over someone's life? Someone's home? I'm going to sue you for everything you're worth. I'm going to prove you defrauded your way into this. Patricia, I interrupted. Stop. She stopped, surprised I wasn't engaging in the fight. You lost, I said simply. Not because I'm smarter or richer or better than you, but because you built your power on hurting people, and that kind of power never lasts. It collapses under its own weight eventually. I looked at her, this woman who'd haunted my nightmares for a year. I'm not going to fight you anymore. I'm going to fix what you broke, and you're going to live with watching me do it. She stood there, mouth open, speechless. Then she turned and walked away, Martin trailing behind her like a lost dog. I watched them go, two people who'd seemed so powerful once, now just small and bitter and defeated. Caleb caught me as the crowd dispersed. That was good. The forgiveness part. I'm trying, I said. But you're not done, are you? I looked back at the neighborhood, at all those perfect houses built on rotten foundations.
No.
Now comes the hard part, actually making it better. He nodded slowly. Just remember, better, not bitter. Better, not bitter, I repeated. It became my mantra. But that night, as I drove back to my apartment, I got a call from my lawyer. Patricia had filed suit after all, claiming W&H Development had acquired the property through predatory tactics, that I'd manipulated vulnerable homeowners, that the whole thing was a personal vendetta disguised as business. It was all nonsense, legally speaking. We'd win easily. But it would be public, messy, and expensive. And it meant this wasn't over. Not yet. Patricia was going down fighting, trying to drag me down with her. And I had to decide, would I fight back with everything I had? Or would I stay true to what I'd told Caleb, to the person I wanted to be instead of the person she'd made me? I looked at the phone, at the legal documents my lawyer was forwarding me, and I made a choice. I'd be better. But I'd also be relentless. Because justice and revenge weren't opposites. Sometimes they were just different names for the same thing, depending on who was telling the story. And this was my story now. Time to finish writing it. Patricia became obsessed. I know because people told me, the mail carrier, the landscapers, even Caleb. She spent her days calling lawyers, banks, anyone who would listen to her theories about how I'd somehow stolen her neighborhood through corporate manipulation and personal vendetta. The countersuit she filed was thick enough to use as a doorstop. I sat in my lawyer's office while he went through it page by page, pointing out the baseless claims, the recycled arguments, the desperate reaching for anything that might stick. Predatory lending practices. Fraudulent misrepresentation. Conspiracy to commit financial harm. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. It's all noise, he said. But it's expensive noise. She's trying to bleed you dry in legal fees, make this so costly that you walk away. I'm not walking away, I said. What I didn't say was that part of me understood her desperation. I'd been there, drowning in a situation I couldn't control, lashing out at the person I blamed. The difference was I'd been innocent. Patricia had built her own trap. The media picked up the story again, and this time the headlines weren't as kind to me. Mysterious developer targets families in wealthy suburb. The article included a photo of Patricia looking haggard and sympathetic, talking about how a vindictive former resident was using corporate loopholes to terrorize innocent homeowners. My face was blurred in the accompanying photo, but the implication was clear. I was the villain now. I called Reed that night, pacing my apartment while the city lights flickered below. They're spinning this against me. Did you expect them not to? His voice was calm, pragmatic. You're David with Goliath's bank account now. That makes people uncomfortable. They want you to be the underdog forever, not the person who actually wins. So what do? You tighten every clause, every document, every filing until there's not a single loose thread for them to pull. And then you wait. The truth has a way of surfacing. He paused. Unless you want to go public? Tell your side. I thought about it. The interviews I could give, the sympathy I could generate. But something stopped me.
No.
I don't need them to like me. I just need to finish what I started. My team of lawyers, Reed had insisted I hire 3 of them, went through every document related to Willow Heights with surgical precision. And that's when we found it. The real evidence, not just Patricia's sloppy management, but actual fraud. For 5 years, Patricia had been funneling HOA funds to Martin's contracting company. Fake invoices for repairs that never happened, inflated costs for work that was done by someone else, phantom maintenance projects that existed only on paper. The park renovation alone had been billed at 3 times the actual cost, with the difference going straight into the Langfords' accounts. My lawyer laid out the documents on my desk like he was dealing cards. This is criminal fraud. Embezzlement. We could have her arrested. I stared at the papers, at the signatures, at the trail of money flowing from the community fund into Patricia's pocket. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it?
Proof.
Justice. The thing that would destroy her completely. What do you recommend? I asked. Personally, let her self-destruct first. Her lawsuit is already falling apart. She can't afford the legal team she'd need to fight us properly. File this with the authorities and let them handle it. You stay clean, stay corporate, and watch from a distance. It was good advice. Smart advice. The kind of move that would protect me and end this decisively. But I kept thinking about Caleb's words.
Better, not bitter.
Hold on to it, I said finally. Don't file yet. I want to see what she does next. He looked at me like I was crazy, but he nodded. The neighborhood started to fracture. I watched it happen through the reports I received, through the emails from concerned homeowners, through Caleb's carefully neutral updates when we met for coffee. Half the residents sided with Patricia, believing her narrative about the evil corporate raider. The other half had started asking questions, noticing the inconsistencies, wondering why the HOA books had never been properly audited. Shouting matches broke out at community meetings. People who'd been neighbors for years stopped speaking to each other. And Patricia, drinking heavily according to multiple sources, was unraveling. She'd show up at the grocery store in yesterday's clothes, screaming at anyone who looked at her wrong. She'd post rambling screeds on the community forum at 3 a.m, accusing everyone from the bank to the mayor to me of conspiracy against her. Martin left. I heard about it from Mrs. Chun, who sent me a tentative email asking about property maintenance requirements. Mr. Langford moved out last week, she wrote. Mrs. Langford is alone now, and she's not well. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. The storm came on a Thursday night. Not metaphorical, an actual spring storm, the kind that drops trees and tears shingles off roofs. The power went out across Willow Heights, and the emergency lighting system, the one Patricia had been responsible for maintaining, didn't activate. The story exploded. HOA president accused of embezzling funds. Local news picked it up, then regional, then national. It hit that perfect nerve of schadenfreude. Wealthy suburban corruption, the fall of a petty tyrant. Everyone loves watching someone who abused their power lose everything. The county prosecutor opened an investigation. The state licensing board suspended Martin's contracting license. The bank froze the last remaining HOA accounts. And Willow Heights, already struggling, began to genuinely fall apart. Streetlights went dark. Snow didn't get plowed. Landscaping died. The perfect neighborhood started to look shabby around the edges, like a movie set after filming Wrapped. The facade was cracking, and underneath was just ordinary suburban desperation. I watched it on the news from my office, the reporters swarming Patricia's driveway. She came out in a bathrobe at 2 p.m, screaming at the cameras. This is all her fault. Emma Carver. She destroyed my life. The reporters, confused, asked who Emma Carver was. Patricia's rant became increasingly incoherent, mixing truth and delusion until even the sympathetic viewer would recognize she'd lost the thread of reality. I turned off the TV. Reed appeared in my doorway. You're not celebrating. Should I be? Most people would. He sat down across from me. You got everything you wanted. She's finished, Emma. Completely destroyed. You won. I thought about that. About winning. About what I'd wanted when I drove away from Willow Heights a year ago, tears streaming down my face, whispering promises of revenge. I wanted justice, I said slowly. I wanted her to understand what she'd done, to face consequences. But this. I gestured at the blank TV screen. This just feels sad. That's called having a conscience. Reed smiled slightly. It's inconvenient in business, but it makes you human. Question is, what are you going to do about it? The letters started arriving at WNH Development's office. Handwritten, some of them. Emails. Even a few phone calls. Residents of Willow Heights, reaching out directly, bypassing the defunct HOA. Mrs. Chun wrote, We didn't know what Patricia was doing. We should have asked questions, should have demanded transparency. I'm sorry we didn't. I'm sorry we didn't stand up for you. Can you help us save our homes? A young couple with a baby. We bought here 3 years ago thinking it was safe and stable. We can't afford to lose everything. Please, if there's any way to work with us. Even some of Patricia's allies, the ones who'd laughed at me at the barbecue. We were wrong.
We see that now.
We just want to protect our families. I read every letter. Some made me angry, apologies that came only after my victory felt hollow. But others were genuine, people who'd been caught up in Patricia's manipulation, who'd made bad choices, but weren't fundamentally cruel. My lawyer was less sympathetic. They're trying to play on your emotions. Don't let them. This is business. But Reed, surprisingly, disagreed. Actually, this is opportunity. You can buy the whole neighborhood cheap in foreclosure and flip it for profit. That's business. Or you can restructure it, save most of these families, and build something that actually matters. That's legacy. I looked at him in surprise. I thought you were all about the profit. I am. But I'm 63 years old and rich enough that profit is just a way of keeping score. I want to see if your angry architecture can actually work in practice. He stood up. Your call, Emma. Vengeance or vision? I called a meeting with the homeowners. Real meeting, not corporate notification. I rented out a hotel conference room off the property, invited every resident, and showed up in jeans and a sweater instead of my power suit. They came. All of them, even the ones who'd sided with Patricia. They looked scared, exhausted, desperate. These were people facing foreclosure, bankruptcy, the loss of everything they'd worked for. I stood at the front of the room and looked at all those faces. Some I recognized from my time living there. Some had changed, older, more worn down. All of them were waiting to hear if I'd save them or destroy them. When I moved to Willow Heights, I began. I wanted to belong. I'd worked so hard to get there, and I thought owning a house in a nice neighborhood meant I'd made it. I paused. Instead, I learned that a nice neighborhood doesn't mean nice people. That perfection can hide rot. That rules enforced selectively are just tools of oppression. Some people looked down, ashamed. Others met my eyes defiantly. Patricia Langford destroyed this community.
Not me.
She embezzled your funds, leveraged your futures for her vanity projects, and created a culture where cruelty was rewarded and difference was punished. I let that sink in. But you let her. You participated or you stayed silent, and both of those choices have consequences. So, what are you going to do? Someone called out. Kick us all out? Take our homes? I'm going to offer you a choice, I said.
I'm restructuring Willow Heights.
New financial model, new governance structure, real transparency. Anyone who wants to stay can stay, but under new terms. Fair terms. Ethical terms. Terms that apply to everyone equally. I projected the proposal on the screen. Debt restructuring, affordable payment plans, community ownership models. It was everything I'd learned from Reed combined with everything I'd wished for when I lived here. This isn't charity, I continued. It's a second chance. For you, and for this neighborhood. But it requires you to change.
Really change.
No more HOA tyranny. No more selective enforcement. No more driving out people who don't fit some narrow definition of acceptable. Mrs. Chen raised her hand, trembling. And what about those of us who can't afford the new terms? There are provisions for hardship for elderly residents, for families with financial struggles. I'm not trying to displace anyone. I'm trying to fix what's broken. I looked directly at her. You all deserve better than what Patricia gave you. And so did I. The room was silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then most of the room, though not everyone. Some people walked out, unable to accept help from the person they'd rejected. But most stayed. Most were willing to try. Patricia was arrested 3 weeks later. Fraud, embezzlement, multiple counts. I heard about it from Caleb, who stopped by my office looking troubled. She's in custody. Martin fled the state. Warrant out for him, too. He sat down heavily. It's really over now. Is it? Isn't it? He studied my face. You got justice, Emma. She's facing consequences. The neighborhood is being rebuilt. You won completely. I thought about Patricia in a holding cell, about everything she'd lost, about how her need to control had destroyed her. I keep thinking about something she said during the storm, that she didn't even know why she hated me, that I was just easier to blame than her own failures. That's not your responsibility. I know, but I struggled to put it into words. I wanted her to be a monster, It was easier when she was just evil, when I could hate her purely and feel righteous about it. But she's just broken. Cruel and broken. And she broke herself. Caleb was quiet for a moment. You know what the difference is between you and her? You learned from being broken. She just broke others. Maybe he was right. I hoped he was right. 6 months later, Willow Heights was transformed. Not physically, not yet, that takes time. But the atmosphere, the feeling of the place was different. The fences between yards started coming down. People planted gardens, real gardens with vegetables and native flowers. The community center, once Patricia's throne room, became an actual gathering place where kids did homework and neighbors taught each other skills. I launched Willow Heights Renewal officially, with Reed's backing and a team of architects and community planners. The model was simple: sustainable housing, democratic governance, radical transparency. Everything Patricia's regime wasn't. The press came back, but this time the story was different. From outcast to owner, how one woman rebuilt the neighborhood that rejected her. They wanted to make me a hero, a symbol, an inspiration. I declined most interviews, uncomfortable with the attention. But I did agree to one. Local paper, small circulation because they'd been fair throughout. The reporter was young, earnest, and asked the question I'd been dreading. Do you think what you did was revenge? I'd thought about this for months. I think it started as revenge.
I won't lie about that.
I wanted Patricia to hurt the way she'd hurt me. I wanted her to lose her power, her perfect world, everything. I paused. But somewhere along the way, it became about more than that. It became about actually fixing what was broken, building something better. And Patricia? How do you feel about her now? I feel sad for her, I said honestly. Sad that she was so empty inside that the only way she could feel powerful was to make others feel small. Sad that she destroyed herself rather than just being kind. The park was the first major renovation. Patricia's Park, built with stolen money, now being rebuilt with community input. We tore out half the expensive Italian pavers and replaced them with permeable surfaces. Added a real playground, not just expensive equipment, but actual play structures designed by and for kids. Created a community greenhouse where residents could grow food year-round. The dedication ceremony was supposed to be small, but hundreds showed up. News crews, local politicians, curious onlookers from other neighborhoods. And there, in the front row, was Caleb. He'd brought his late wife's favorite flowers to plant in the memorial garden we'd created. She would have liked this, he said quietly, kneeling to plant them. She always said communities should be built on kindness, not rules. Smart woman. She was. He stood up, brushing dirt from his hands. She would have liked you too. Something passed between us in that moment, something I wasn't quite ready to name, but felt anyway. The beginning of something that wasn't about revenge or justice or fixing broken places. Just two people who'd survived storms and found each other in the aftermath. The sign went up at sunset. Willow Heights Community Garden, open to all. We debated dozens of names, fancy names, meaningful names. In the end, simple truth won. But there was still unfinished business. Martin came back. Not voluntarily. The police caught him 3 states away and extradited him. But before the trial, he tried one last time to salvage something from the wreckage. He showed up at my office with a lawyer, demanding payment for his silence about Reed's early involvement in the Willow Heights acquisition. It was blackmail dressed up as a settlement negotiation, and his lawyer looked embarrassed even presenting it. I listened to the whole pitch. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the audit trail, and showed them everything. Every properly filed document, every legal acquisition, every transparent transaction. Reed's involvement had been entirely above board because I'd insisted on it. You can't threaten someone who stopped hiding, I said, echoing what I'd told myself months ago. I'm not Patricia. I didn't build this on lies and corruption. I built it on patience and documentation and doing things right. Martin's face went pale. His lawyer mumbled something about reconsidering their position and practically dragged him out. Caleb, who'd been waiting outside my office during the meeting, raised an eyebrow when they left. Trouble. Nothing I couldn't handle. I locked my office door, suddenly exhausted. Is it always going to be like this? Fighting them off one at a time. For a while, probably. Wounded animals lash out. He walked with me to the elevator. But eventually they'll realize you're not just stronger than them, you're right. And that's harder to fight. The transformation continued through the fall. New families moved in, diverse families, families who would have been rejected under Patricia's regime. Young couples, elderly residents downsizing from bigger houses, single parents, immigrants, people with disabilities. The neighborhood that had been so uniform, so exclusionary, became something richer. I walked through it one evening with Caleb, both of us off-duty and unofficial, just two people taking in the changes. Children played in yards that had once been silent showcases. Music drifted from open windows. Someone was teaching a cooking class in the community center, and the smell of spices filled the air. "It's working," Caleb said, almost surprised. "Your vision. It's actually working." "It's not my vision," I corrected. "It's what this place should have been all along. I just removed the barriers." We stopped at my old corner house. The young couple who lived there now, interracial, which would have given Patricia an aneurysm, had painted it a cheerful yellow and filled the yard with the native flowers I'd planted years ago. They'd survived, wild and resilient. "Do you miss it?" Caleb asked. "Living here?" "No," I said immediately. Then more honestly, sometimes. I miss who I was when I moved in. That hopeful person who thought a nice house would mean a nice life. What do you know now that she didn't? I thought about that. About Patricia and her perfect pearls and empty heart. About the year I'd spent plotting revenge. About the moment I chose to help instead of hurt. That nice houses don't make nice lives. Nice people do. And that sometimes the person who hurt you is just broken, and breaking them back doesn't fix anything. I looked up at the house, at the flowers, at the life blooming where I'd once been driven out. And that the best revenge is actually building something better. Caleb took my hand. Not dramatically, just quietly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You did good, Emma." "We did good," I corrected. Because I hadn't done this alone. Reed with his resources, Caleb with his support, even the residents who'd chosen to change rather than cling to Patricia's poisonous vision. A year and a half after I drove away from Willow Heights in tears, I drove back through those gates for the last time as an owner. The neighborhood barely resembled the place I'd fled. The gate itself was gone. We'd torn it down 6 months ago, transforming the entrance into a welcoming public street with bike lanes and pedestrian paths. The Willow Heights sign had been replaced with something simpler. Willow Heights Community, all welcome. I was there for the final transfer ceremony. W&H Development was turning over governance to a newly formed community cooperative. The residents would own and manage their neighborhood themselves, with constitutional bylaws that prevented anyone from ever holding the kind of power Patricia had wielded. The ceremony was small, intimate. Just the residents, a few local officials, and the team that had made this transformation possible. Reed came, which surprised me. He usually avoided ceremonies. But he stood in the back, watching with something like pride as I signed over the documents. "We've renamed the street," Mrs. Chin announced, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. She'd become one of the cooperative's first elected leaders, this woman who'd once been too afraid to speak. The city approved it last week. They unveiled the new sign, and my throat tightened. "Carver Avenue." "We wanted to honor what you did," Mrs. Chin continued. "Not just buying the neighborhood, but changing it. Showing us what community could really mean." I didn't trust myself to speak for a moment. Caleb squeezed my hand. We'd been together for 8 months now, taking it slow, building something real. "I don't deserve this," I finally said. "I came back here wanting revenge. But you chose something better," Mrs. Chin replied. "That's what we're honoring. The choice." Later, after the ceremony, after the potluck dinner where people brought dishes from every culture, after the kids ran wild through yards that no longer had fences, I stood on the hill overlooking the neighborhood. The same hill where I'd sat crying the day I left, watching my failed dream disappear in the rearview mirror. Now it looked so different. Lights glowing in windows, laughter carrying on the evening air, the community greenhouse lit up like a beacon. Reed joined me, breathing hard from the climb. You know, I've made a lot of money in my life, built a lot of developments. But this. He gestured at the scene below. This is the one I'll remember. Why? Because it matters. Because you proved that doing the right thing doesn't have to mean being weak. That justice and compassion can work together. He smiled. You're going to do more of these, right? Other neighborhoods, other places that need fixing. If they'll have me.
They will.
This model works, Emma. Inclusive living communities. I think that's going to be your legacy. Legacy. Such a big word for something that started with slashed tires and a determination not to be broken. Patricia's trial concluded that winter. I didn't attend, but I read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. 18 months in prison, restitution, probation. Martin got 3 years. Their house went up for foreclosure. A younger couple with twins bought it. They knocked down the pretentious columns Patricia had installed, painted it a warm terracotta, and filled the yard with tricycles and chalk drawings. Life, messy and beautiful, where perfection once strangled everything. The news asked if I wanted to comment on Patricia's sentencing. I declined. What was there to say? That I felt vindicated? I did. That I felt hollow? Also true. That I'd learned cruelty comes from fear and emptiness, and that understanding it doesn't mean forgiving it? In the end, I released a simple statement. Justice has been served. Now, we move forward. Spring came, and with it, the first anniversary of Willow Heights renewal. The community threw a festival, music, food trucks, art installations created by residents. I walked through it with Caleb, both of us anonymous in the crowd, just 2 people enjoying what had been built. A little girl ran up to me, maybe 6 years old, holding a handful of wildflowers. These are from our garden. They're native flowers, which means they belong here. My teacher said someone planted the first ones, and now they're everywhere. I took the flowers, my vision blurring slightly. They're beautiful. She ran off, and Caleb pulled me close. You okay?
Yeah.
I looked at the flowers, at the crowd, at this place that had rejected me and that I'd transformed through sheer stubbornness and eventually, reluctantly, grace. I think I finally am. The mortgage statement arrived in my mail a week later. Not mine. The one from my original house, the one I'd sold at a loss. A neighbor had kept it, apparently, and handed it to Mrs. Chun when the cooperative was sorting through old HOA files. It was stamped paid in full in red ink, dated the day I signed the transfer papers. A symbolic gesture, meaningless legally, but heavy with meaning anyway. I tore it in half, then tore those halves again, confetti of a debt long settled. Not the financial debt that had been paid months ago, but the emotional one, the weight of anger and hurt and the need for revenge that I'd carried like a stone. Caleb found me sitting on my apartment balcony, pieces of paper scattered around me. What's this?
Freedom, I said.
I think I just let go of the last piece of anger. He sat down beside me, and we watched the city lights come on as dusk fell. My phone buzzed, Reed, sending me information about another neighborhood in trouble, another opportunity to build something better from broken pieces. I looked at it, then put the phone down. Tomorrow. Tonight, I just wanted to sit here with this man who'd warned me not to become what I hated, who'd stood by me while I figured out the difference between justice and revenge, between winning and actually building something worth having. 6 months later, I was back at Willow Heights for the last time. Not for business, not for ceremony, just because Caleb wanted to show me something. He led me to the community center, to a wall I'd never really looked at before. It had been transformed into a mural, painted by local artists and residents. It showed the neighborhood's evolution, the before and after, the destruction and rebuilding, the journey from exclusion to inclusion. And there, in the center, was a figure that looked suspiciously like me. Not idealized, not heroic, just a woman standing at a crossroads, one path labeled revenge and the other redemption, choosing the harder road. Beneath it, a plaque. They told her she didn't belong. So she bought the street their houses stood on. Then she taught us all what belonging really means. I stood there for a long time, reading those words, feeling the weight of everything they represented. The pain, the anger, the slow transformation from victim to victor to something better than either. What do you think? Caleb asked softly. I thought about Patricia in prison, about Martin on the run, about the neighborhood that had rejected me now celebrating me. I thought about revenge and justice and the difference between them. I thought about the person I'd been when I first moved to Willow Heights and the person I'd become. I think, I said slowly, that they told me to leave their perfect neighborhood. So I did. And then I built a better one, right on top of it. Caleb smiled. That's exactly what you did. We walked out together, past the gardens and the greenhouse and the playground full of children who would grow up never knowing what this place used to be. They'd only know what it became. What it could be when people chose kindness over control, inclusion over exclusion, healing over hurt. And I realized, finally, that Patricia hadn't won and I hadn't won. We'd both lost what we'd been fighting for, her vision of perfect uniformity, my need for revenge. But in that loss, something better had grown. Something neither of us could have built alone, something that required breaking before it could be remade. They said I wasn't welcome here. They were right. I wasn't welcome in their world of casual cruelty and manufactured perfection. So I built a different world instead. One where everyone was welcome, where belonging wasn't something you had to earn through conformity, but something you received through simple humanity. And that, I finally understood, was the best revenge of all. Not destroying them, but proving them wrong. Not becoming what they were, but becoming what they never could be. Better, not bitter. That was my legacy. That was my victory. That was enough. So here's my question for you. If someone broke you, and you had the power to break them back, would you choose revenge or would you choose to build something better? Drop your answer in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories about turning pain into power.